Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I want to ask you this question, and I want you to raise your hand if you agree. Are you a negotiator? Who sees themselves as a negotiator? Okay, that's good. That's good. That's most of the room. That's great. And how many negotiations do you have per day, would you say? Have a think for a moment. Every day. So on an average day, raise your hand if you have 5 negotiations or more. Keep it up if it's 10 negotiations or more. 50 negotiations or more. 100 negotiations or more.
I have an 11-year-old.
She's got an 11-year-old. So anybody with children would have more than 100 negotiations per day. So what if I redefine negotiations as any time you're trying to get agreement or cooperation from someone else? Does that change the way that you answer the question? So hands up if you have more than 100 negotiations per day. This is what I want to start with. We are all negotiators, all of us. Negotiation skills are relevant to all of us. And good negotiators do a certain amount of things. They have certain skills that I will get to today. But I want to talk to you about what happens when you're not a good negotiator or a skilled negotiator, because we are all negotiating all the time. But what happens when we don't have the skills? The problem that I see working with my clients, and my clients will range from Westpac to Uber to Genesis Energy to all the way to Ministry of Health. They all have the very same problem. And that problem is, I want to be nice. I don't want to jeopardize the relationship. I'd like to use tactics, but I don't want to do anything that feels wrong. I'd like to use negotiation tactics, but it doesn't feel right. It feels icky. It's not in line with my brand, with my personality. Or I'd like to be more aggressive, but I don't know if it's valid what I'm asking for. I don't know if it's okay to ask for these things. I'm not quite sure what I deserve. I'm not quite sure how to go about it. I don't quite know what the strategy should be. How can I open? How can I structure this conversation? And these are exactly the same problems across all sorts of industries that I work with. Another problem is, it's not me. It's that I'm up against a really difficult negotiator. Does anyone feel like that sometimes? They always say no. How can I even bring up the topic? They're going to say no straight away. And so because there are these problems, when we're not upskilling ourselves to become really good negotiators, we run the risk of doing these things to accommodate, to jeopardize the relationship. We negotiate for suboptimal outcomes. We employ tactics, but we feel icky about it. We're viewed in a certain way that we don't want to be viewed. For example, we're viewed as weak or a pushover. We're misunderstood, or we're viewed as greedy or too aggressive. I think that's what scares a lot of my clients anyway, right? Sometimes we prepare for a negotiation. When they're off in their own world, they bring it down again. They bring the opening offer down because, I don't want to ask for that. I feel a bit cringy asking for that. So there's a lot at stake. We fail to recognize value. What do I mean by that? I want to tell you a story. Has anyone heard of the orange story when it comes to negotiations? No? Great, I get to tell it for the first time. So imagine a place in Alaska, somewhere really far away, snowy, cold. There is very short supply of fresh fruit and vegetables. And there are these 3 sisters who live there. And they're quite young. There's, one's 12, one's 8, one's 5. And the father goes away on trips and comes back and brings presents for his daughters. He always brings fresh fruit. And on this occasion, he's come back with all sorts of fruit and an orange, 1 orange. And so he comes into the house and they all go, I'll have it, I want it, I want it. The older sister says, oh my God, last time I had an orange, it was 3 years ago. I can't wait to have an orange again. I miss that taste. And the middle sister says, you got it last time. That's not fair. I want it this time. And then the younger sister says, that's not fair. I've never had an orange. I've never had the chance. It's mine. I want it. I want it. Well, what do? We'll split the orange. How can we split the orange? They start negotiating. So the older sister says, I think we should do it by age. right? I'm the oldest, and I've got the biggest tummy, so I'm going to have a bigger part of the orange. And the younger sister says, no, 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 no. I think we should split it by how much you've had in the past. Since you've had oranges in the past, I think I should get the biggest piece because I've never had one. And the middle sister goes, oh, this is not looking good. How about just we'll split it into 3 equal parts? How's that? And that sounded fair, and they were not really happy with this, but they ended up splitting the orange into 3 equal parts. And you know, when we do that, when we compromise, we seem to, I mean, it's a fair outcome, so we feel like maybe it's a win-win even, but we're not really happy about it. So the oldest sibling, she walks away and mumbles, "Whoa, you're not having any of my cake." And they go, wait, hold on, what cake? What are we talking about? And so she says, look, I wanted the rind to make an orange cake. And you were all going to have a piece, but now I'm not giving you any because I don't even have enough rind to make a big cake anyway. And the middle sister says, yeah, and I wanted an orange juice. I wanted a big glass of orange juice, and I only have 1/3 of a glass of orange juice. And the little sister said, well, that's weird because at kindy I was doing gardening lessons and I wanted to plant the seeds of the oranges and grow an orange tree. So clearly we see that the splitting into 3 equal parts was not the most effective way to split the orange. If you think about it, it's not really a story. It's not just a theoretical story. This is how we do business. This is how we negotiate with our children, our friends, my husband for sure. We split, you know, whatever sounds fair, we will do. And we get into this habit of the art of compromise. But we feel a bit shitty about it, really, because it's not what we really wanted. The outcome is suboptimal. So the better way to split the orange obviously would have been, you know, the seeds, the rind, the orange juice, and each would have had 100% of what they wanted. It's a shame, really. I tell the story, and it's a funny story, but when I observe my clients doing business, this is how they negotiate, and they think that they're getting good outcomes. So what we do at Share Negotiations is to guide these clients towards the best outcomes that they can achieve in their negotiations. And we do this with a few things, with strategy, with tactics, with planning, with coaching, with upskilling them in a way that they can then go and execute the negotiations themselves for really good outcomes. Some of the tools that I teach are there for awareness, really, because when you think about it, when we're negotiating, we want to be influential, but we're also influenced all the time. We want to be able to anticipate, identify, and deal with tactics that are coming our way. And we also want to be able to choose the right approach, the right strategy, and the right tactics for the situation that we're in. So I'll give you an example of a framework that I use, and I hope that you will use this and start recognizing how people are influencing you in your day-to-day lives. So this is a framework for the 3 types or the 3 approaches to persuasion. And I wonder if you could just listen, as you're listening, start to think about which approach do you go to first? What is your go-to approach when you're trying to persuade someone to do something? All right, so the first one is the power-based approach. When we're using the power-based approach, we're getting someone to comply with us by showing them there's not really much they can do about it. They don't really have much of a say. We put on the pressure, okay? And we might threaten, or we might show them that they're bound to lose something if they don't do as we say, and we might do this with authority or when we have the power over them, right? You do this with who?
I was just going to say parents and kids.
Parents, fantastic. So who else lives in this paradigm? I know that as a parent I do. Not as individuals, but as groups. Which groups? CEOs? Great. Presidents. And we shall name the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of... Okay, so yeah, so lots of people live in this paradigm when they think that they can get their way immediately. But you know who else? Unions. So I work a lot with unions. Unions live in this paradigm. If you don't give us what we deserve, what my constituency deserves, we will strike. And so I want you to think about the risks of using this approach. Let's take 2 thought exercises. One is me trying to convince my son to eat his greens. Okay? If you don't eat your greens, there's no dessert, no TV, there'll be trouble. How does he respond? Let me tell you. I didn't want dessert to begin with. I wasn't even interested in dessert. Let's do another thought exercise. Who has teenagers? Everyone else pretend you are the teenager. So you're the teenager, you want to go to a party, and parents of teenagers, think about your own children, they want to go to a party and you want to say no. So when the parent wants to say no, the teenager using the power approach will say what? How do they threaten? You can't stop me. Who said that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Do you have teenagers?
No.
Oh, okay. You were, okay. Yes, you can. How? Oh, you saw, Sonia.
Yeah.
How do you?
Yes, we can.
So Corinne, her son, says, I'm going to this party. You can't stop me. Sonia responds with?
There's a lot of girls over there, a lot of alcohol over there. I don't want you to get in trouble. You have the whole life in front of you. And let's just wait a little bit longer.
I'm going anyway. You can't stop me. How do you respond?
You don't have the device. I'm taking your phone.
So that deteriorated very quickly, and that's usually how it happens. So the risk of using this approach, and think about every example where people use power. When someone uses the power approach, because of an underlying dynamic of reciprocity, the person will respond in kind and will start threatening in response. And this is probably, we intuitively know this, and so we don't want to get into a power struggle or a contest of power, and that's why we don't use this approach many times, even though as parents it's very tempting. The second approach is the rights-based approach. And when we're using the rights-based approach, we get someone to comply with us, not because it's us and, it's not about us, it's about justice. It's about what's fair. I am deserving because it's only fair. This is the F-bomb of negotiations, fairness. We get someone to comply with us by referencing some neutral criteria, something that's, the law, what's common, what other people are doing, and according to that, look at the evidence for why I'm right. For example, when I'm asking for a raise, I go, well, it's not because I'm fabulous. It's just, according to the KPIs, I've met them, and I've done extra hours and I've been here long enough. But what happens when I start listing all of the evidence for why I'm deserving?
The other side will look for things you haven't done.
Immediately. So even if they're not saying it, they're thinking, you've met your KPIs, I'm paying you to do that, no biggie. Or you've been here long enough, well, Sonia's been here longer. And so it's a problem. Again, we're into this contest now. It's not a contest of power, it's a contest of who is more deserving, right? So if we do these thought exercises again, if I'm trying to convince my son to eat his greens, I might say, well, you didn't eat it yesterday, so now you need to eat your greens. Or I gave you this and that before, so now you owe me. Or I slaved in the kitchen all day, so please eat your greens. And then he comes up with counter examples, yes? And the teenager thought exercise. What do they say when they want to go to a party and you're saying no? And they're using the rights approach.
I'm a teenager. That's not fair.
It's not fair. You don't trust me?
Everyone else is.
Everyone else is going. To which you respond with?
I don't care.
So hands up if your parents ever said to you, well, if everyone else jumped off a bridge. All right, so what they're doing there is they're dismissing your evidence. It's not relevant, and therefore it's not going to help you here. We're in a contest of who is more deserving. And so when we use this approach, and while we're encouraged to use this approach in many instances, we need to know how to do it right. We need to not get into that who is more deserving struggle. The third approach is very different, and it's the one that we take at Sheer Negotiations. It's the interest-based approach. When you're trying to get someone to comply with you using the interest-based approach, what you're doing there is twofold. First, you understand their interests, and then you show them how, you sell it to them, or show them how complying with you is actually serving their interests. You should want this. This is fabulous for you. This is in service to you. And so who lives in this paradigm? Many people think they do, but they don't actually. They revert back to rights. So as you're listening to this, I want you to think carefully and reflect on whether you really, when you're using the interest-based approach, do you really know their interests? Do you really find out what's most important to them? Do you sell it to them as an opportunity? So the opportunity, that word, is at the heart of the interest-based approach. So with the thought exercise, if I was, trying to get my son to eat his greens, a very hard thing to do, always an example of a good negotiation. And I use the interest-based approach. I might say something like, well, there's the classic exchange. If you eat your greens, there will be some reward for you later. Or I might say, you'll get to be big and strong. He's 6, so this works. You'll be big and strong. You'll be able to do parkour or whatever it is that you're into better if you eat your greens. What if you are that teenager wanting to go to the party? Your parents say no. How do you convince them using the interest-based approach?
I'll learn to socialise responsibly, and I'll get the skills that you're telling me I need.
That's strong. That's strong. You're a good negotiator. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I've had this from my teenagers. Give me a chance to show you that I can be trustworthy. Yeah.
That's very clever, teenagers. Because this is an opportunity. This is good for you. You should want this. And suddenly you're going, "Ooh, I'm glad there's a party because, how else would I be able to achieve what I wanted to achieve?" So fabulous. This is the interest-based approach. And the interest-based approach is very hard to do, much harder than people think, because while we're trying to sell ideas to other people all the time, it's very hard to understand their interests. See, if we were trying to use an interest-based strategy, we would need to live in another person's head. It would no longer be about us. It's all other directed. And when I work with clients, what we do is we first understand what's important to them, because it is all about them. What do they need to achieve long term? What are their interests? And I'm going to separate interests from goals. What are their true interests in the long run? And once they've achieved understanding their own interests, put yourself aside now. No more ego, no more you. Now you need to live in the head of the other person. And all of the planning is about thinking about the other person, their interests. What matters to them? Is it a legacy? Is it impressing someone? Are there deadlines that they're trying to meet? Is the budget important? What is the priority for this person? And so it's all other directed, and that's really hard work to do. Believe me, even though I work at this, when it comes to negotiations with my own partner, it all goes out the window. It's very hard. So let's do a little exercise to see if we can differentiate between goals and interests. Francesca, I'm going to use you first. Prepare. Every time I ask you to do something, please say no. Okay? Francesca, it's so cold in here. Would you mind turning up the air conditioning? Francesca, please, would you mind? I'm so cold. Come on. No. Okay. Fine. Would you mind getting me a cup of tea?
No.
Really? Okay. All right. Let's move on to. Sorry. What was your name again? Monique. Francesca's no help. Would you mind? Do you have a jacket on you that I could borrow, or like a blanket or something? No. Thanks. Thanks for nothing. What's your name?
Me, Carolyn.
Carolyn, there'd be no help. There's a Bunnings down the road where we could get a heater of some kind, like an oil heater. Would you mind just popping over and bringing one?
Correct answer is yes, I wouldn't mind. No, I'm afraid to do that.
Well, this is what I wanted to show you now with this silly exercise. There are 3 things that I'm asking for. I even asked for air conditioning, a 4th, right, to show you that I could actually have 2 different goals within the one negotiation with Francesca. I know that this is not about air conditioning or tea or a heater or anything else in that lower level, because these are just goals. They're just the means to the end. The reason I know this is because I've got alternatives. So as soon as there's an alternative way to achieve what I truly need, then I know what I truly need is something completely different. It is to be warm, right? Because I'm cold. Everything else is a means to that end. But because we're all sophisticated, I want to take you a level above. And a level above wanting to be warm are my long-term interests. My long-term interests just happen to be something completely different. Let me share them with you. I have to bang on the table to make it dramatic. You ready? So I'm sick and tired of really bad working conditions. I've had enough. I'm 40 years old. I deserve to be warm at work. I've had enough of all of this cold and uncomfortable. And if Francesca doesn't turn up the air conditioning, what message are you sending to me about my worth? About my status? And so can we blame people for getting very upset about air conditioning? Anyone gotten upset about air conditioning? There's a group of women, of course, everyone's at one point in their lives. So this is the difference between goals and interests. And I think we all know this intuitively. We may even negotiate this way, negotiate for interests. We might share with other people what our interests are, but we don't spend enough time thinking carefully about what are the interests of the other party. Because if we knew what their interests were, we wouldn't meet impasses, we wouldn't be head to head. We would think about how can we creatively find a solution that suits both your interests and mine. And I want to show you an example. In the background, you've got a definition of two types of interests. You've got the tangible and intangible interests. And as I tell the story, I'd like you to focus on intangible interests and try to find or recognize the intangible interests at play. All right? So the story is, it's something that happened a few years ago. It was a large company in the United States that reached out to me on LinkedIn as a last resort. And they wanted me to help them with an impasse in the negotiation. They had tried to acquire a family-owned company, also in the United States. In this family were a father, a mother, and two sons in their 30s. And they wanted to acquire this company for the URL. Nothing really beyond that. I mean, they wanted a few of their clients, but it was more about the URL. And so they didn't want to spend more than $2 million. And because they didn't want to spend more than that, they had gotten into a very difficult negotiation with this head of the family, the father, the negotiator there, who wanted $3.2 million for that company. And anything beneath that was an insult. And so they were negotiating for months. And when they reached me, I asked them, what had you done so far? Like, tell me about this negotiation. I think you can imagine how it went. Okay? We want to give you $2 million. I want $3.2 million. 3.2, you're not worth that much. You've got bugs in the system, you've got problems, you don't have that many clients, you haven't been around for that long. So they're talking at the goal level. So if you remember that lower level, they're talking about price, right? At no point did they ask themselves or the other party, why? Why this much? What's important to you? In the long run, what are you going to do with this company? Or what are you going to do with this money? Or what are you going to do with your retirement? Right? So I want to ask you now, what are the priorities for the head of the family? Let me tell you what he has said about himself. He said, we haven't been around for that long, but we have been around for 10 years. And 10 years ago, nobody knew us. Now I can't walk 100 meters down the street without being recognized. In fact, they call me the genius around here. My boys grew up in this company. We founded this company, on blood, sweat, and tears. So what do you think is important to him? Legacy? Recognition, status? Reputation? Maybe bragging rights?
Giving his sons a business to grow into?
Yeah, a home for his sons. And if we think about it, if all of these things are taken away from him, the legacy, the status, the home for his sons, I mean, that's really his identity being taken from him, because today he's a genius, but tomorrow, And so when we're thinking in that direction, and it's no longer about the money, we're not thinking at that lower level of the hierarchy, we're really thinking beyond. Now we can come up with some creative solutions, and everyone can do this, and I bet you're really good at this. What can we give him beyond the money? Shares? Okay. Even less costly than shares. Yep.
He could be a consultant.
Great. Give him a role. Yep. He wanted to retire, so he probably wouldn't want much of a role, but yeah, give him something.
Like a brand ambassador.
Brand ambassador, the face of something. Yeah.
I'd divide up the URL and the rest of the business.
Okay. Take the URL and give him a business.
Yeah, he keeps the rest in the status, and I just want the URL.
I would say possibility. I think they couldn't have done it at the time. Press release.
Don't have to disclose the amount, but just to make it good, give them a profile.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
The thing of the century or something like that.
Press release, some fame, name.
Keep him on the website as the founder.
Yes, keep him on the website. Sure, I mean, all really great ideas. We can give the kids a role, right? The kids, the sons in their 30s. There's a lot that we can do, and it wouldn't cost us it wouldn't cost us as much as that 1.2 million that was the difference in money. And you might say, oh, that's very naive. Everything is about money. At the end of the day, it's about tangible interests. I'm here to tell you, a lot of the time, it's about intangible interests. And when it is about intangible interests, specifically when you see egos involved, when you see people getting upset, when you see people passionate, there's something that is intangible there that needs to be met. And we can meet those things with creative solutions. So for example, with this company, what we did was we gave him a role. As you said, it was sort of is a role where he didn't need to come into the office every day, but he did have an office, and on the office door we wrote the genius, just for gags, right? So that he could continue to be the genius. And we gave his sons a role, we gave him all sorts of other things. I mean, I suggested this stuff. My role is not to negotiate. I mean, I can negotiate for other people, but most of my clients just want a little bit of guidance so that they can do it themselves, and they bought for 2 million. So at the end of the day, it wasn't about the money, was it? Those opportunities are missed all the time. It's amazing how many opportunities are missed. And so what I like to do with my clients is supply them with a model of negotiation that they can use not only to prepare for a negotiation, but also to execute that conversation. Because what I'm trying to achieve for them is clarity and confidence, and to filter out all the noise, to focus on what is important, which is interests and creative solutions. And that's why I called the company Sheer Negotiations. It just happens to be my surname, but also sheer as in transparent and clear. And so this model, I'll give it to you now, and I will give you also those taking photos, I can give you also a QR code so that you can download it. I can't get deeply into it because I don't have the time, but I can tell you about it that it's only 3 phases, very easy to remember. And using the model, what you would do is focus first and foremost on why am I here in the long run? What is important to me? What are my priorities? And then why is the other person here? Why are they negotiating with me, not with some other person? What is their alternative? What is important to them? What are their priorities and limitations to their authority? Who is this other person? And then we think about what are all of the items that are negotiable, okay? And that's something that's typically is skipped over in negotiations. What else is negotiable? What can we add here? And only lastly do we think about how do we present options to this other person. So we never start a negotiation with, here's a solution. What do you want? Well, here's a solution. No, it's not like that. It's a process. And it's a process where you pull the other person's chair to your side of the table. Even if they're competing with yours, even then it's possible to pull their chair to your side of the table and work at this as if this is a problem that we can both fix together. And this is very different from how negotiations are taught usually. So if you go to negotiation training or you read negotiation books, even when they talk about a win-win solution or win-win outcomes, interest-based approach, even then, because I've done a lot of this training, so I know, they seem to talk about a linear process where we're negotiating one item at a time. And that necessarily leads to a competitive outcome. It's a zero-sum game. I'll give you an example. When we're buying a car, we talk about the price of the car, right? And it's a linear negotiation. Has anyone done negotiation training? You have in the back? Have you heard the acronym ZOPA? Zone of Potential Agreement? So this is, you have? So this is how negotiations are taught. The zone of potential agreement is when we map out the buyer's plan, all right? There's an opening offer. So for the car, I want to pay $5,000, yes? There's a target point. I know I'm probably going to have to pay a little bit more than $5,000, maybe, I don't know, $7,000. And there's a walkaway point. Like the most I'm willing to pay is 10. And then we've got the seller on the other side. My opening offer is 20. My target point is 11, and the least I'm going to agree to is 7, right? Now the zone of potential agreement, the ZOPA, is between 7 and 10. And now we've mapped out and we've planned how to approach this negotiation, how to push their walkaway point, how to convince them to give us the price that we want. So this is a strategy. I don't like it. It's linear, it's boring, it's competitive, it's confrontational, and it feels icky for a lot of people. And so the tactics that you would use there are, I don't know if you've heard these, but good cop, bad cop, everyone's heard. Yes, the bogey tactic, the chicken, the sweeteners, the anchoring in a non-ethical way. And so there's a range of tactics that we can use there. Or if you use this model, which is about understanding of interests, what else can we add to the negotiation? So it's not just about price, but it's about price and registration and new tires and fixing the dent and warranty, and throw in that bike and throw in that bottle of wine you've got there and everything else that can be relevant. Then it's no longer a linear negotiation. And a lot of you will do this intuitively, but it's great to have a plan, because suddenly we come up with all of these things that are unprecedented and that really can impress the people who are watching us, and we become those negotiators that people come to for advice. At the end, we want to present options to the other party in an artful way. We want to give multiple options simultaneously, because people are 47% more likely to say yes if you give them options. People with kids, again, when do you want to get into the shower? In 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, or in 20 minutes? There's no option of not getting into the shower, right? Works on adults too, turns out. Yeah. The tactics that I've spoken about were competitive. When we're using the model, there are collaborative tactics that work really well. They're still persuasion tactics, but they're now working to ethically influence the other party towards an agreement. It's bringing them to your side of the table and creating shared understanding. And these tactics are, they could be a bridge solution, like with the orange. Bridge solution is when everyone gets exactly what they need, 100%, very rare, right? There's also compensation, that is a tactic. There's superordination. There's genuine curiosity. There's a range of tactics that, in the context of a collaborative negotiation with a sheer negotiations model, work wonders to bring the other party to your side of the table, create trust really quickly, create rapport, and create buy-in, because we want that momentum to make an agreement, right? So one of the tactics that I love teaching, because it's hilarious the way that it impacts us, is the anchor, in an ethical way, because an anchor could be taken to both competitive and collaborative negotiations. So the anchor, let me tell you about two studies that blow my mind. Okay, so the first one is here on the left. 52 judges were given a case of theft. All right, and they were told, think about this case and decide how many months of jail time this person should do. But before you decide, please roll the dice. And if they rolled a low number, they gave 6 months. And if they rolled, 5 months. And if they rolled a high number, they gave 8 months. Judges, dice. So an anchor is, I think we all have heard the word before, but an anchor is, or an anchoring bias, is when a person is influenced by a number that acts as a reference point. And that number can have nothing to do with the situation that they're handling at that moment. So we are influenced so much by the things around us, by the information that's given to us, by precedents, by what we're expecting, by our plan, by what we've heard, by what the person says at the table. This is why opening offers are a big deal in negotiations. And so now you see that dice could affect the way that we negotiate. What about this one here? So people were asked, obviously in the United States, because it has to do with social security numbers, they were asked to give their social security number, just the last 2 digits, as a number. So 17, 55, and then to decide how much they were willing to bid for this bottle of unbranded French wine. So they had a taste of the wine, they gave their social security number, the last 2 digits, and if the last 2 digits were a low anchor, so between 0 and, 09, then they bid $11.73 on average. And if the last 2 digits of their social security number were a high anchor, so anywhere between 80 to 99, they bid an average of $37.55. Is this interesting? Is this relevant to us? How can we use this? How can we employ this in negotiations? And are we persuaded in this way? We need to know, right? Stakes are high. So let me show you 3 types of anchors. I'm only going to speak about herd mentality. I think you've all heard of the opening offer, the first number that we say. And the way to educate a party in the negotiation, there's a whole art to it, but I think we've all heard of that as well. For example, I might say, look, typically when I do this sort of job, it ranges between this much money and that much money. So I'm going to take you to the bottom of that spectrum, right? You can educate the other party, particularly if it's a client, about your services and about what to expect in terms of price. But herd mentality, that's very different. So I want to ask you a question. Who has been in a hotel lately? And not this hotel. Who has slept at a hotel recently? Yeah? Well, lots of people, travelers. So let me ask you this. Did you see a card in the bathroom that says, please reuse your towel? Somebody give me an example of what was written on that card if you remember.
It was like, if you care about the environment, please reuse this towel, otherwise throw it on the ground. Like, basically, like put it on the ground.
Yeah, okay. Did you reuse your towel?
No, because like I don't like a damp towel. And they didn't have heated towel rails, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but I felt guilty.
please reuse your towel for the sake of the environment. Any other reasons? In order to save some money? $10?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mine had like a stack on how much water takes the towel to clean or something. It was in Singapore as well, so I was like, wow.
Well, you learned
Big
something.
on the environment.
Yeah.
For a reason.
Okay, good. Any other cards? None of these hotels had seen this research. So the research that I'm about to tell you about. In this research, they tried in the hotel to find what cards would work to persuade people at the hotel to reuse their towels. And the true fact was that when people stayed for 4 nights or longer, 75% of them would reuse their towel at least once. And so they put that on the card. 75% of our guests reuse their towel. We hope you will as well. So when they use, let me compare with the first card, the usual one that they use. Yeah, for the sake of the environment, approximately 35% of people would comply, and that's not bad. But when they use the second card, 75% of our guests reuse their towel. We hope you will as well. Compliance shot up by 26%. And then they did something different, slightly different. See if you can pick the difference. And compliance shot up by 33% on top of the initial 35%, and that was the most compelling, persuasive thing they had done in that research. 75% of guests who stayed in this room reused their towel. We hope you will as well. Why does that work? Do you have any idea?
You'd be like noticed.
Ooh, you're being watched through cameras in your bathroom. I mean, I hope not.
You're losing the room.
I really hope we're not being watched. I think, sorry? Yes. Yeah, well, we may not want to be judged, but also I think that when we're on the fence, well, I know because there's so much research around it, when we're on the fence and we don't quite know how to behave, we use other people's behavior, particularly if it's the majority of people, as a reference point, as an anchor. And so we can use this in sales. Is anyone here in sales? Okay, so I worked with a large CRM company whose problem was our salespeople who work on the phones trying to get customers from the free product to the paid product are having trouble convincing them to make that move, because obviously it's very hard to move from a free product. So we tried that. We said 68% of clients or customers who had medium-sized companies like yours who moved to the paid product loved it and recommended it onwards. Maybe it's something that would work for you too. And their sales shot up. Because we can use statistics, we can use information as an anchor. There are many, many ways to use an anchor, but I think as soon as we understand that we as humans are persuaded by funny things, we're so biased, that we're persuaded by little bits of information, we can start artfully putting those into our negotiations. We can weave them through the plan, and we can use them to educate the other party about what to expect. And so these are the sorts of tactics that I would teach my clients and that work for them. And think about maybe how that could work for you, and if there's a statistic that you could use within your company that you could say to either to stakeholders or to shareholders or to clients or to colleagues to persuade them to do what you want them to do. So the way that I have to explain, these models, they don't work as one size fits all for everybody. They have to be adapted. They have to be bespoke because I work with such a range of companies. It's got to be right for each and every company. And so what we do is use a tailored approach. And I want to give you an example, and this is the case study that you may have seen in the agenda. The case study is a hospital. Do they negotiate in hospitals? Yes, they negotiate in hospitals. What about the births department? Yes, they negotiate at the births department. So this is the births department of a hospital in Australia, and the problem there was something that seemingly is unrelated to negotiations. Women were reporting high levels of trauma from giving birth, or within that experience of giving birth. Is that related to me? It could be. The head of the births department had read my book and was sold that everything is a negotiation. So we had a conversation and he said, can you help me analyze what the problem here was? It might have to do with the consultations. And when we analyzed, we found that there was lack of trust between patient and doctor or midwife. And we also found that because there wasn't continuity of care, they didn't create that relationship. Not only was there lack of trust, but lack of information. So the practitioner didn't know what were the priorities, the interests of the patient that they were serving. And so that patient, when it came time to be, to be in labor, to be in birth, she felt misunderstood or not known or vulnerable or lost, and she didn't know what was happening. No one was filling her in. And so we can't stop trauma altogether, but what we could do is start to redesign what those consultations, the prenatal consultations, looked like, so that when it came time to be in labor, which can have adverse events, could have emergency, there could be an emergency situation, but when it came time to be in labor, there was the trust there to make the patient feel less vulnerable. And the doctor actually knew what was important to this patient, so that they wouldn't go straight to surgery or they wouldn't go straight to, some of the interventions that she didn't want. And so we redesigned together, myself and the head of the births department, the consultation. We had new protocols for how to handle a 10-minute and 20-minute consultation. And they're now implementing this in the hospital, and it's going to go to other departments as well. Isn't that amazing? Can everything be a negotiation? I'm really hoping it'd be great for business. It could also be really great for everyone trying to communicate and everyone who's trying to get their way, not at the expense of the other party, but really find a creative, good, sound solution for the impasses, the problems that we're having. And with that, I want to turn to what is unique about women, because it's a group of women. And I really want to give you these tips because these are fabulous and so implementable. I have to start with this. There is no real difference in the way or in the ability to get good outcomes between men and women. Okay, let's start with that and ensure that we know that we're not the inferior race when it comes to negotiations. But what loads of research is telling us is that when it comes to promoting our own circumstances, promoting our own career progression, getting better terms, getting better resources, getting extensions of deadlines, everything that is for us, we're not doing as well as men are. Men have a more propensity to initiate negotiations, to find non-traditional ways of getting what they want, so they won't wait to be tapped on the shoulder or for the review. They will ask for what they want, even when there's nothing on the horizon to suggest that there is, any reward on the table or waiting for them. They're more likely to knock on doors, and they're more likely to give a high opening offer. And this leaves women behind. It creates a gap. Now, I'm not specifically talking about the women in this room, who I think are very, by virtue of you being here, are probably very proactive and know what you're doing. But in general, if there is a pay gap, if if there is a gap in our ability and our confidence to negotiate for what we want, then we need to quickly and effectively give out these tips, spread them around so that we can all benefit from them. And these are the tips. Actually, before the tips, why is there this problem? Keep you on the edge of your seat. Why is there this problem? Here is my guess. I'm connecting one and one, okay, to make two. So I saw this research where psychologists saw that there was a difference on where women and men were placed on the spectrum of the locus of control. Anyone heard of locus of control? You have? Yeah, locus of control is a spectrum where on one end we have an internal locus of control. I control my life. I make life happen. People who have this internal locus of control mentality will knock on doors, will proactively seek what they want. If you want something done, you better do it yourself, sort of mentality. Yes, and they have or feel that they have the responsibility to make things happen for themselves. That is the internal locus of control. On the other side of that spectrum is the external locus of control, where we feel like life happens to us. And so we will wait for things to happen, to be recognized. And we maybe feel like we don't have the power or the control to make things happen in our lives. Yeah, so we will wait for the external world to give us a sign. And so men and women, when placed on this spectrum, there's a substantial difference between them. Women have a substantially more external locus of control. So I thought that was really interesting because that would mean that we take less responsibility or are less proactive in seeking out the things that we want, knocking on doors, for example, asking for what we want. There's another reason why there may be that gap. I think the risk for women is higher. Do you agree? For asking what we want. Maybe there's a gender reputation to uphold, that it's about other people, that we're here to serve others, that it's about the group, it's not about me, I don't want to be greedy. Because there's a social cost of asking for what we want, we might be more inhibited or shyer or uncertain, and we don't want to ask and underdeliver. So have you heard of this research that men will, I think everyone's heard this, that they will apply for a job when they fit only, 25% of the criteria? And women wait to fill all of the criteria because we don't want to underdeliver. Okay, so you're shaking your heads because it sort of affects everybody, and I think we relate to this. So here are my best tips. The first thing that we can do for ourselves is we can move down the spectrum. I can't remember if it's up or down the spectrum of locus of control. We can decide that we need to make things happen for ourselves. We can decide that this is the time to start networking, as you are doing today, or start asking, as somebody said, two people did before, asking for help with the things that we want help with. We can also tell people what we aspire to, and we can start talking to the people who can get us there and ask them to sponsor us. The second thing is to build a narrative. Now, this is something that I teach in detail, but in 30 seconds, a narrative is the story that, say, you will tell yourself about what role I play in your life. So here comes Noah, the know-it-all who thinks she knows better than me. Or here comes Noah, she's going to try and sell me her programs. Or here comes Noah, the expert. Or here comes Noah who is going to solve my problems. Or here comes Noah, the what. What am I to you? It might be a negative narrative. And if it is, I need to work on that. I need to reflect on what I think you might think of me and how can I create a different narrative. And I might need to ask you to be my mentor, or ask you for help, or make you feel good about yourself in some way. Not sucking up to people, but controlling the narrative so that you don't see me in a negative light. There's a whole art to it. Prepare, obviously, and this is something that I help people do. And I want to stop and discuss having a plan B, which in the negotiation literature is called a BATNA, best alternative to the negotiated agreement. People who have had negotiation training know this word, horrible acronym. Yeah? So having a BATNA is important. Why? There was research done to compare women and men as they were negotiating in a simulation about the price of a house. And the people who were not primed I'll tell you about the priming. The people who were not primed showed that there was a difference between men and women. So the men outperformed the women in this study. But half of the participants were primed with power. So they were empowered in some way. There are different sources of power. And where they were powered, women outperformed the women who were not primed, whereas there was no difference between the men. Kind of weird. But what that meant was that with the primed participants, so all of the participants who had power, who felt powerful, women and men negotiated for similar outcomes. So women did a lot better. And what is the best source of power in a negotiation? Having a plan B. Because power is defined as lack of dependency. Yeah? So if I've got an alternative, then I don't have to beg Francesca to turn up the air conditioning. I can turn to my BATNA. Who was my BATNA? Remind me.
Carolyn was going to Bunnings.
Yes, someone else. You were my BATNA. I don't need to beg and I don't need to feel, that I'm dependent on Francesca if I could just have an alternative. So if you're going for a job interview, the best thing you can do for yourself is get yourself another job interview, right? And if you've got a BATNA, then you feel more empowered. And when I talk to groups of women, the first purpose is to empower these women to feel that they have legitimate, this is what we were talking about before, I feel legitimate in what I want to ask for. I have benchmarked and I know what I'm worth. I know my value. I have alternatives. I have authority. I have a network. I have a sponsor. So these are all ways to empower ourselves, and that is an art in and of itself. The last thing is, you mentioned it before. I loved it. Why is it that we negotiate fiercely, you'll know what I'm talking about, on behalf of our children?
Absolutely. You feel for that.
On behalf of our bosses, on behalf of our team, on behalf of a cause, yeah? But when it comes to negotiating for ourselves, it's a bit awkward and we're not quite as fierce. If this is the case, let's create a beneficiary. Mine was fake for a long time. Artificial beneficiary. I created a mentor. I told him, you're going to be my mentor, and I'm going to come to you, not mentor, but someone that I have to go and report to about all of my negotiations. So I'm going to report to you, and you have to be very angry at me if I don't get the results that I want. Okay? Or you can think about, if it's money that you're negotiating, how you're going to take care of your parents in their old age, or how you're going to take care of children or unborn children, or what you're going to do for somebody else with that money. It helps to create this sense of purpose that works with women. Isn't that bizarre? So I wouldn't say this to a group of men, but this is what works for women. And I wanted to share that with you, and I hope you will share that with women in your circles, because I'll give this advice for free all day long if women could just negotiate better for their own career progression and their own things, their own salary, etc. So I'll give you a very short example of how a 2-hour session with a high school principal led to her getting, in one conversation, $50,000 increase on her salary. Okay, all we did with this brilliant woman is give her a plan. All right, we worked on a plan. I sent her the plan. She executed it. We thought about benchmarking, we thought about what she was worth, the value that she was bringing to the table, and we thought very carefully about the board of that school, what their priorities were, how much they needed her, and why they needed her, and what was more important than what. We also thought about timing of having this conversation. 50 grand in salary increase, and that's when I knew I had to raise my prices because I think I took about $300 for that meeting, but okay. So I'm going to take you back to one of the first slides. We are all negotiators. You are all negotiators. What can you do to be sharp negotiators? What can you do to ensure that you're getting optimal outcomes for your negotiations? First and foremost, you need a strategy. You need tactics. You can learn about this in books. You can contact me, pick up your card, find me, and contact me, and I will send you. There's a QR code there for you to use, but also my email address, I think, is on there, and I will send you resources. I will send you articles, and I can send you books that you can read. There's stuff on the internet, and there are prime programs as well, and that might be a fit for you or a fit for your company or not at all. But do keep in touch, connect on LinkedIn, because strategy and tactics can change everything. The second thing is separation from ego, right? This is not about what I want. This is putting myself in the head of the other person. What do they want? What are their priorities? Ability to read interests makes a good negotiator. So it's not about wanting to be warm. That's mid-level interest. Go beyond that. You know, is this about status? Is this about Noah feeling that she's worthy of something? That's what it's truly about. That's at the center of negotiations. Confidence to steer a negotiation. Because I've got a strategy and I'm clear on what I deserve, I'll have the confidence to steer that conversation. And lastly, benchmarking information. That's part of the preparation process. I'll leave you with information about my company and to ask you again to reach out if I can help you with resources. And with these QR codes now, if you would like a summary of today, because I saw some of you taking pictures, then I could send that, well, you can download it through there. Thank you and good luck in all your future negotiations.